It's almost noon on the East Coast. It is a national holiday in the US for MLK. I didn't think of that, when we scheduled this conversation, but actually, it's totally perfect because I'm not focused on markets at all. I can completely focus on this conversation and then go hit the gym after we're done. Chris Paul, CEO of Hercules Silver, is my guest today. The symbol for Hercules is BIG, big on the TSX venture. And I had one other conversation with Chris back in October. It's been almost 3 months now. Amazing. Almost 3 months. And that proved to be quite a notable conversation that we had, Chris. And it got a lot of attention. I can't even count the total number of views and people that have tuned into that by now. It's in the many, many thousands. And we have a good turnout here again today. So there's a lot of questions to get to. Schedule an hour for this conversation, but I kind of want to start going back in time a little bit, Chris. So obviously, the announcement on October 10th was truly a game changer. One of the most overused expressions in the junior mining sector, but it truly was a game changer, and I think it probably changed your life in a lot of ways. It changed a lot of things. So I guess my first question is, how have the last 3 months been for you? And what has it been like to be the CEO of this company when you suddenly get this huge influx of attention?
All out mayhem. All out mayhem. I mean, it was busy before the discovery, but as you can imagine, uh, you know, we made the discovery. The remarkable thing is we made the discovery in a bear market. So there's not really a lot else going on in the sector right now. And I think that, funny enough, I think that kind of benefited us a little bit in a weird kind of way because everyone's eyes are on us. And so, I think the last time we talked, I was sort of making mention of the fact that I was talking to the bankers, and there was a lot of offers for money and financing on the table, but I didn't want to do that back then. I didn't want to do a brokered financing at the time, and thankfully that was the right move. Because obviously Barrick came in and made a really nice offer at a pretty good premium, so that was great. And yeah, I mean, look, since then, I think everyone's just trying to figure out what the heck just happened at Hercules. Who is this company that just came out of the blue with this, new porphyry copper discovery when I don't think there's been one in the United States and, probably a very, very long time. So yeah, the phone's been ringing off the hook, as you can imagine.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. You're the most active company channel on co.ca for like 2 months. Just pulled back in the last. Oh, you're top again, maybe because of this conversation. But last week, you guys dropped to like number 3 or 4 in the trending channel. But yeah, a lot of attention, a lot of speculation, a lot of investors speculating about all kinds of things. And we didn't really hear from you, from the company, for a couple of months there. So now you put out news the first day of the new year. We digested the news, and now you're open to speaking again publicly. And here we have this conversation. So my next question is, how did the Barrick deal come together? And like, what can you tell us about that? What you had, confidentiality agreements. You talked about that in the last conversation. The first rule of confidentiality agreements, you don't talk about them. But now that they've gone public and they have taken a big stake in the company, what can you tell us about how that deal came together?
Yeah, that's a really sort of fun and interesting story how that came together. And you're right, it is a little bit tricky in a public forum because there are confidentiality agreements out there. So we'll just sort of talk in, without using too many names. But Barrick reached out, I think after it was after we talked. So the last time we did this space, You know, the bankers are sort of the first people on it, and you know, there's a lot of interest, obviously, from you know, institutions and things like that. But you know, we had a lot of warrant money coming in, and I just didn't want to do a broker deal at the time. And then I think it was like, I can't remember exactly, but I think it might have been like the Friday after that space. You know, the phone starts ringing, and it's Barrick, and so we get on a Zoom with them. Um, you know, we basically sort of spend like an hour, whatnot, going through the project, going through kind of all the data and everything else, and then you know, basically, you know, the sort of what I was kind of getting back to them was, look, you know, this is great, and I'm glad we're talking, but you know, here's the deal. You know, there are offers for money on the table. I don't, you know, necessarily, you know, want to just say no for sure to those. But I also know that, you know, with strategics and majors, it can often take, you know, several months sometimes to do anything, right? Like to come at me with an offer for a financing. And I just remember their reaction was kind of like, well, you know, you'd be surprised. You know, we are quite flexible, and you know, if we like what we see, we're able to move on a dime. And so, you know, the next week comes around, and there was a couple other strategics, let's call them, you know, that were making site visits and coming out to have looks at the core. And so um, I basically get the call back from Barrick the following week, and it was like, okay, you know, we're interested in doing something here. So I remember the call came in right at the time when we had, you know, another one of these groups literally in the core shack looking at the core, and I'm just sitting in my truck watching this all go down. So of course I get to go back out and go back into the core shack and say, well, listen, I have something I have to tell you, you know, and that's basically your competitor just called. And you know, I hate to put the pressure on because I know you just got here, and I know you're only just looking at stuff now, but we've got an offer on the table. It's a pretty good one. And you know, the reality is they want to move quickly. So I hate to sort of put the pressure on you, but that's what's up. And then I remember they, you know, sort of played it cool. And then, you know, one of the guys goes back to his truck and, you know, sits there for about an hour making phone calls, comes back out, tries to play it cool, was like, listen, is there any way we could get on like a big 20-30 person meeting with our whole team, our whole head office tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. on Zoom? So, okay, this is getting interesting. And so anyways, the next morning comes around, we're back at the core shack again. We all hop in their truck at 10 a.m. We've got the laptop on the dashboard, their whole boardroom table sitting on the dashboard of their truck on the Zoom screen. And, you know, we sort of chatted out. I tell them, look, this is a situation. You know, I've got this offer. I'm going to take it unless you guys want to do something, you know. So they took that and basically sort of, you know, leave it with us, and, you know, can we have until next week? No, sorry, you got till Friday, basically, right? Like, I've got this bird in hand. I mean, I'm going to take it. So, anyways, that happened. We go up to the property, we sort of tour around the property. I email the third company that's sort of expressed interest at the time, you know, get back to the Airbnb in Cambridge. Next thing you know, they're calling on the phone saying, really? Okay, we got till Friday? Oh, shit. Okay. All right, we're on it. And so, yeah, I mean, it was great, right? Because basically there was three groups that you could kind of all sort of, you know, play off of each other, and leverage that to get the best deal possible. And so that's how, you know, that deal ended up landing with Barrick. And you know, ultimately there was kind of three, you know, more or less equal offers, like financially. So you know, it got even better because I got to, you know, basically say, okay, well, what other sweeteners, like, who's, you know, you got three supermodels to choose from, right? So who are you going to pick? Well, ultimately you go with the one with the best personality. And that's not to say that the others didn't have good personalities. I just really liked the way Barrick was coming at it, the way they were negotiating. They were very honest. They were very forthright. There was no gaming. It was just, we're prepared to do this. We're prepared to pay the premium. The last thing I asked for was I said, look, we're a very small company. This all happened very quickly. You guys have wicked technical expertise. So we basically, as part of the agreement, seconded 3 Barrick geologists. And of course, over the winter, they get to have all the data, and, we get to leverage their expert in-house, like geophysicists, geochemists, structural people, leapfrog modelers. These are some of the best people in the world. And that came as part of the deal. So ultimately said, you know what, Barrick just feels right. They were the first to put their hand up. They've been nothing but good, honest people to deal with. They're giving us all this technical support, and basically went with them. And so that's how the deal all came together. And obviously it was very quick. I remember, I think we sent the term sheet to them on a Wednesday. We basically followed up on Thursday, and then they said, on the follow-up Zoom call, they said, yeah, we basically accept these terms. They asked for that fraction of a warrant, which would allow them to get to 15%, which was obviously very agreeable. And then the next thing was they asked if we could close on Sunday. So we basically had 3 days to close it. It was wild.
Yeah, that is wild. That is quite a story, and it's very interesting to see how a major company like that can move so quickly when they really want something. We hear a lot of stories in the mining sector about how these companies, like Newmont, like Barrick, are very slow, and so many people have to approve something or to go up the food chain to get approval for something. And in this case, they were able to act very quickly. So that sort of pours some cold water on a lot of the things that we hear about these major mining companies. They can move fast if they really want to. It's just they don't often, really want to, I guess.
Yeah, they didn't have the luxury of time, I think, right? I think they recognized the fact that they weren't the only ones, putting their hand up, right? They weren't the only ones bidding, and so there was a huge sort of air of competition going on at the time, and I think they were aware of that, and obviously that was a huge benefit for us. I think that's always going to be a huge benefit for us is where this discovery was found, right? You're in a
Hmm.
very good jurisdiction. You're kind of right in their backyard. It's the first porphyry that's ever been discovered in Idaho, and this is going to get very competitive because there's just not a lot of these large copper discoveries in very safe jurisdictions in the majors' backyards. So, this is going to be one that is going to benefit us from having that competition as we go forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's a mining state in the US with a long, history of mining, but mostly silver mining. And the conventional wisdom was there's no porphyries in the state. And so that's getting turned on its head here with what you guys have found so far. So I do want to get into the nitty-gritty of the drill program and the results you put out recently. But I do want to ask another question because I hear a lot of rumors. Obviously, I talk to a lot of people in the mining industry on a regular basis. A lot of investors tell me stuff that they hear, and I've heard rumors that Rio Tinto is staking in your area, and there's other big companies that are driving around trying to stake. What can you tell us about the staking activity around you? And what can you tell us about the last news you put out where you said you staked 570 claims?
Yeah, so definitely there's a lot of staking activity going on in the district. Um, there's Rio Tinto for sure, are out there. We don't know exactly how many of them there are. They were based in Cambridge, right? So Cambridge is like the closest town to the project. That's where we stay. The company actually just purchased a house on 8 acres in Cambridge. So that's going to have, I think, 7 bedrooms. It's going to, house our entire crew outside of the drillers and everything. So that's great. But we're all based in Cambridge. And so there's one motel, the Frontier Motel. And that's kind of where, right after the Barrick deal was announced, I think it was like the following day or 2 days later, all of a sudden, all these Utah plate trucks, mining trucks, show up at the Frontier Motel. It's like, whoa. And, you could see labeled on one of the trucks, it was, it had Rio Tinto on one of the trucks. It was like, okay, well, we know. And of course, they brought trailers in, and the beds, their pickups were full of these claim posts. There was like, hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of these claim posts. So we knew exactly what was going on. So we grab one of our geologists and we say, listen, you're going to get up at 5 a.m. tomorrow. You're going to sit outside the motel and you're going to follow these guys where they're going, because there's nothing illegal with that. And so that was what happened. And so we got a pretty good sense of at least where they were starting. And then, yeah, I'm not sure, like, we're not still down there. I'm not sure if they're still down there. I think they probably are. I know Barrick is also going pretty hard on the staking as well. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw upwards of several thousand claims. I don't know that. That's speculation. That's just an educated guess, maybe, on how many claims they may be going after. Super, super, super encouraging for me. And this was an open discussion, right? It was, yeah, look, it's a big district. This thing goes all the way to basically 40 miles sort of northeast, southwest, right? And Hercules is along that trend. So there's a lot to go after, and we had no issue at all with Barrick going out and doing this regional staking. 95% of the district is covered with these younger post-mineral flood basalts that came in 16 million years ago. So it's a little bit challenging, right? But I think Barrick is prepared to come in and do, I'm guessing again that they're probably prepared to come in and do very large airborne surveys, and try and see under that cover. But really, it's sort of information to me. It's just sort of signaling to me that this is something, that an opportunity that they're obviously very excited about. They obviously see this as, potentially a new frontier of porphyry copper exploration. Like you said, where there's never been porphyry coppers discovered before. So this opens up, obviously, an entire new belt, an entire new district, which is incredible to do in 2023, 2024. Last I heard, they were still out there. I know they've got at least one helicopter, and they're very excited and very encouraged, by this district. So the fact that, we've got the best one, at the core of it all, puts us in a obviously incredible position. And so, it just tells us that their investment didn't just stop there. I'm sure they're spending, probably millions of dollars, completing all this staking outside of that. So they're very, very keen to do something here, is what that tells me.
And on January 2nd, you said the company has staked 570 lode mining claims to the north of the property, and securing a key extension of the new 3D IP anomaly. So can you tell us about those claims and the new 3D IP anomaly?
Yep. So yeah, we're actually still going now. We're still doing a little bit of staking now. You're just kind of constantly pouring through the data and sort of drumming up new targets to pick up. But what we were seeing overall is a north-south, sort of trend in the geophysics. It's not really that easy, right? Geophysics, it's never just going to give you like a boom straight line. We're probably going to allude a little bit more about what we're seeing in the geophysics soon. But yeah, I mean, the intention of getting those claims was to more or less add a buffer around where we think, where it looks to be extending, which is sort of northeast. So, you always want to have lots of land. Like you don't want to just stake, just the anomaly. Like, you want to add a pretty good buffer around that. And so that's what we've gone and done. So we're pretty happy with that, but we're still adding to our land position. We'd like to continue. We'd like to basically finish the staking that we still have planned, because releasing the geophysics, for one, it's not quite finished. So what the next sort of project is, because we've got the 2023 data inverted. It's complex, it's very large. One thing I can assure you, beyond a shadow of a doubt, is it's extremely good. It's extremely encouraging. It's very large. It gives away information on trends, that we don't necessarily want our competitors to be able to see, because Rio Tinto is out there still. They're still staking. So, we don't necessarily want to give away the information just yet. And that information, that data is a currency at the end of the day. And we don't want to give it away for free. So, it will get released. I can assure you beyond a shadow of a doubt, it is probably the most exciting thing, if not the most exciting thing I'm looking at right now. And you'll see that when it comes out. But in the meanwhile, what we're actually trying to do in the background, and this is a huge benefit of having Barrick. They've got really, really solid geophysicist by the name of Lee Sampson. I think this guy's one of the best in the world. And he kind of comes for free, right? So it's like, we get one of these world's top geophysicists to go through the 2022 data, the 2023 data. And so we actually hopped on the Zoom call. I was telling you about that earlier this week, Robert. And one thing that we're trying to do is sort of resolve, like the 2022 survey was done under very different parameters. The intention was just to see the very near surface and just get very high resolution data in the near surface, because we were looking for silver. We had no intention of exploring for a deep copper porphyry that we didn't know existed over that 2022 survey area. So when we did the 2023 survey, I guess I'll just explain a little bit more about kind of how we use the geophysics and why it's important too. So, we drilled the discovery hole 5, really with no rhyme or reason, other than the fact that, we had that geophysics anomaly, that chargeability anomaly at depth. We didn't know what it was, and so we wanted to test it. And so we sort of, cautiously tested it on the 5th hole of the program, which, lo and behold, ended up being the discovery hole. Now, when you drill a discovery hole, and it's a blind target and you had no idea it was there, you didn't expect it was going to be there, you don't really know where to go next from there. We did have data to the southeast, because the 2022 survey was surveyed in sort of like a strip, a northwest southeast strip. So being that we had some data to the southeast on the chargeability, we basically stuck to the original drill plan, which was to basically drill all along that strip of data that we had where the chargeability was highest. And so we started moving southeast along that. Obviously, as we've talked about in the news, these holes have not found the potassic center. Every hole so far has hit, what is typically considered sort of the margins of the system. It's not the outermost propylitic, but it's not the high grade core either. It's the phyllic. It's the kind of in between zone where you get kind of moderate grades. So we need to obviously hone in on this high grade core. We need to find the early porphyry intrusion that brought in all the mineralization that we haven't found yet. And so we said, okay, well, let's survey the entire property. It's going to be a massive undertaking because IP is not cheap. And let's do much longer lines, much larger spacing, and let's try and see down 850 meters rather than the 300 meters we saw down in 2022. So really, really glad that we did that, because it's given us a completely different picture. That strip that we surveyed in 2022 is just actually one small portion within this really, really large and sort of intricately shaped anomaly that's sort of curving, has a curved shape to it. So again, it's not just an easy, straight line, blah, blah, blah. So what we're trying to do now is combine the high resolution data that we have in 2022, which seems to actually really line up well with the high grades. So you'll notice at the top of the holes, right when we enter the porphyry system, there seems to be, better grade, and then it sort of goes into lower grade below that. Well, the 22 chargeability anomaly really pulled out that high grade blanket really well. So we're basically trying to combine the 2022 data with the 2023 data, and this is what where Lee Sampson's expertise comes in, so that we can sort of use that 2023 data also to sort of peel out where that potentially high grade enrichment blanket is, and where that's trending. So that's a work in progress that we're doing now, and I think once that's done, and we're really happy with our land package as we continue staking, then we'll probably look to put out that data. So that's what's going on in the background.
Yeah, that's excellent. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. So there's a lot of speculation about the order of the holes that were drilled in 2023, and maybe you had more information when you drilled hole 26 and you specifically targeted that. But what I'm hearing you say basically is you guys were pretty much blind the whole program, and you just followed the plan that you had from the 2022 IP, and you didn't change it in the middle of the program.
No, the only hole that was changed was 26. So
Okay, it
um,
was changed.
26 was an audible. The rest
Okay.
were essentially planned before the season started, and it wasn't anything fancy. It was literally just let's test the highest chargeability, along where we have data. But in reality, like if you're familiar with porphyry copper exploration and how IP fits into that, typically, if you're able to survey the entire system, which I think we've pretty well done in 2023, you should see, uh, you know, porphyries have pyrite halos, right? Low grade phyllic pyrite halos. That's usually what's going to light up as your high chargeability. So you typically don't want to drill the high chargeability, as we kind of did. And so that sort of came to us obviously near the end of the program as we, tested along it. We thought, well, that's, it seems to be curving sort of to the west, right? Like it seems to be sort of concave to the west. So let's step over to the west and let's see. And we're doing big step outs on all these holes. But let's see what that brings. Is are we going to see an increase in temperature? Are we going to see a change in the alteration? Is it going to be getting hotter? And so that was the rationale behind drilling hole 26.
Right. And then, so my next question, I know you're not going to tell me anything about hole 26, what you saw or the assays, but the timing of that, when do you think you'll be able to announce the assays for hole 26 and the rest of hole 21? And some people even asked about holes 14 and 18, but I'm not holding my breath for those holes to the southeast. I'm more interested in holes
Mm-hmm.
21 and 26.
Yeah, and that's the right way to be thinking for sure. And we've alluded to it obviously in the last press release that the important holes that intersected, significant porphyry mineralization were 5, 8, 11, 21, 26, right? And that's why we've focused in, obviously, in the maps, the plan maps on that area. It's not that the southeast ones didn't hit it. It's just that that's kind of where we're seeing the higher temperature stuff. And then to the southeast, getting more propylitic. Again, good holes, good information holes, because now it's starting to show a little bit of a zonation that we can sort of model in 3D and use that to, plan the next phase of drilling. So actually, I do think that the 26 and the rest of 21 are going to come out very soon here. I feel a little sheepish saying that, knowing that I think our last interview, I told you that we'd be seeing results every 3 weeks, and that didn't end up being the case, which was a function I can kind of get into a little bit about why there was such a huge delay between the October release and these three follow-up holes. And really it just had to do with when we were shipping, sending shipments of core to the lab, they would receive, let's say, hole 8, and they would start assaying hole 8. And then we'd finish cutting 11, and we'd ship 11, and then they'd receive 11. And then instead of finishing 8, they would basically start working on 11 next. And so, and the same thing with 21. And so we start, we'd receive 8 till near the end, and then we'd start receiving assays for 11, and we start receiving assays for, and we're like, what is going on? And had to say, listen, guys, no, you got to do this in chronological order. And so, hence what happened there with the delay. But realistically, I actually expect to be able to put out 26. Like we've almost got that, all of the assays for that hole. I've even started drafting up the release, sort of, having a pretty good idea what the rest of the whole assays are going to bring. So, man, my target is to get it out for the week of Roundup. So next week, I hate putting deadlines on myself in case I don't meet them, but I'm trying here, hopefully.
Okay. And then a lot of questions about the core picks. You posted the core photos for the first 4 of the deeper holes on the Hercules Silver website. I've gone through them, and I notice what you're saying, that like shallower, you get that nice purple sort of bornite, higher grade zone that extend. I mean, like for example, in hole 21, it looks like that extends down to about a little past 1,000 feet, and then it kind of fades out. You get a little lower grade. I'm not a geo, so just as my being a mining investor for 20 years, I don't think the end of the bottom part of 21 is high grade either. Tell me if I'm wrong. But so you've got that little bornite, or not little, but maybe it's like 50 to 100 meters in those holes. You got that bornite layer. What does that tell you? And the higher silver grades in hole 11, what does that tell you?
Yeah, no, good question. So I'll start with the higher silver grades in 11. And again, I'll give you an interpretation, but that may be subject to change in the future as we get more information. But my interpretation, is that the silver, lead, zinc in the rhyolite, like going back to what we were originally exploring for, what those 308 historical holes were all drilling for, was silver, lead, zinc hosted in the Hercules rhyolite, right? So that's a shallower stratigraphic unit. And so I think big picture here is you had a porphyry copper system, and it's very common, very, very, very common, to get silver, lead, zinc mineralization distal to porphyry copper systems. And so it only makes logical sense that the silver, lead, zinc in the rhyolite is sort of the really distal part of really the porphyry copper system. So when we see like those silver grades in hole 11, which is porphyry, that suggests to me that we're sort of in a transitional zone. So you're definitely getting pretty marginal on the porphyry side, because you're getting distal away from it, and you're getting towards that epithermal silver part of the system. That's my guess, and so I think that's consistent with really what the interpretation as a whole is that hole 11 was drilled into the marginal phyllic part of the system, and we're starting to see some of the high grade feeder veins to the epithermal silver in the rhyolite. So I think that's what's going on there. The other question was, what was the other question?
About the shallower zone of bornite.
Right. So yeah, so we're seeing, what happens is we'll drill, any one of these holes. We'll start in the rhyolite. We'll get that silver off the surface. We'll go through a unit called the andesite, which was where all the historical drilling shut down because it's relatively barren. except for really high manganese carbonate, which is kind of interesting. And we'll see if that maybe in the future has some economic significance. But you'll go through the andesite, and then you hit the really key sort of dividing layer between the upper plate, which hosts the silver, epithermal silver, and the lower plate, which hosts the porphyry. And that dividing unit is the red conglomerate. It's a very, very key unit. A little bit enigmatic over what it is, but again, my interpretation is it was an erosional unit. So as soon as you get below that red conglomerate, it's always leached. Like you can see evidence that there was bornite and chalcopyrite there before it, but that's all gone to this red earthy iron oxide. It's called hematite. And so you'll get that hematite for about 30 or 40 meters, whatever. It's forming veins and disseminations that look identical to what the bornite and the chalcopyrite look like just below it. So you can tell that what happens, that red conglomerate, these things normally represent like river channels and things like that on surface. So whenever you see a conglomerate, that tells you that that was eroding down into the porphyry. So at some stage, that porphyry, it probably formed 200 million years ago. It was uplifted to surface, and that red conglomerate had actually started eroding down into it. And so it oxidized and it leached out that upper sort of 30, 40 meters of it usually. But that's where the bornite is. And so, in holes 8, 11, and 21, you could tell obviously the bornite wasn't, that enrichment zone wasn't as high grade as it was in 5, but it's dominantly bornite. We don't see chalcopyrite in there. The only copper mineral we see is bornite. So what that's basically telling us is that the upper part of the porphyry is the better part of the porphyry. That is where you get the bornite, which is 66% copper by weight. Chalcopyrite is 33% copper by weight. So bornite is, if you had the same amount of bornite as you had chalcopyrite, that bornite is going to be double the grade. So we want the bornite. In those holes that we drilled, 8, 11, 21 that we just released there, that bornite zone, that upper part of the porphyry, had been partially eroded into by that red conglomerate, and we saw more leaching in that than we saw in hole 5. So one of the key targets going forward on the next drill program is we want to get that really nice high grade upper part of the porphyry with the bornite, but we want to get it sort of further below the red conglomerate. You want to get away from that red conglomerate because that 30 meters below it has had that leaching. So, then you kind of get into more complicated ideas like what caused that bornite? Why are we seeing bornite in every single hole closer to the top, right? You go through the red conglomerate, and always at the top is the bornite sort of dominant mineralization, and then it transitions below that into chalcopyrite, pyrite. We've got a few different ideas. I won't even bother getting into them because they're quite speculative at this point. But the long story short is the information is telling us we want to start targeting where is that upper, shallower part of the porphyry more likely to be preserved. And so the way you do that is you model the geology in Leapfrog. And you see, okay, here's the red conglomerate, right? We've hit it in all these holes. We can model that in 3D. It's a plane. And then you start to model the other geology and the other zones, and you start to see where are they thickening and where are they dipping away from that red conglomerate. Because that's what we want. We want that high grade zone dipping down and away, getting under that, further under that red conglomerate where it's preserved. What we're seeing is that's going to be to the northwest. So that's sort of a key direction that we're going to be going next.
Yeah, you read my mind. I was going to ask that exact thing. Are you going west, northwest? There were some breadcrumbs in the last news on January 2nd. Basically, you're showing that it's vectoring west, northwest. So how much room is there for you to step out to the west, northwest until you get to a property boundary?
Good question. I'm not sitting on my computer right now, so I can't measure the distance, but it's over a kilometer to the property boundary. So we've got a good amount of distance before we get there.
Okay. All right. And so with the IP, you're not going to say anymore. You're not going to put that out because you're giving free information to your competitors. But when should we expect that will likely be made public, if you had to guess?
It's tough to say, right? Like I said, I want to lock up some key stuff that we're still going after to the north right now, which is helicopter staking and slow and challenging and minus 20 degrees Celsius and snowing. And so, yeah, look, I'd love to give you a hard date, but the other thing too is I really want to get that 2022 survey properly merged with the 2023, which is challenging because they were done with different parameters. So leveling those two is quite difficult, but once those two things have been accomplished, um, then we'll be ready to put it out. But like I said, the bottom line is it's very good. I assure you that when it comes out, everyone will be very happy and very excited with what they're seeing because it just shows scale. Like it's just so much bigger than what we saw in 2022, and it's stronger. Like it's the values go much higher. So it gives us a lot of encouragement.
Okay. And then, a lot was made of the word supergene in hole 2305, and some notable people in the mining industry made a big deal about the supergene core. How much supergene are you seeing in the other holes?
Yeah, it's interesting because initially I had sort of assumed that a lot of the high grade enrichment was due to supergene. Now, supergene is when you leach out, that red conglomerate leaches the copper from, say the top 30, 40 meters, redeposits it below the water table, the paleo water table. So it'll basically coat your copper mineralization with another layer of copper mineralization. And normally that coating is a mineral called chalcocite. And we do see chalcocite, but it just seems to me that that's not what's doing the heavy lifting. The bornite is what seems to be doing the heavy lifting. So I don't know that, there is some supergene effect for sure because we're getting that chalcocite, but there's just so much more bornite than there is chalcocite that I don't know so much about the supergene interpretation as much anymore as kind of this different interpretation that you get the shallower parts of the porphyry system which form bornite because bornite is not a supergene mineral. It requires very high temperatures to form that, so you don't form it near surface from weathering. um, so yeah, that's still to be
You're still
figured out.
figuring out. Yeah, this is the thing. It's so interesting to see how this evolved because the company put out the news on October 10th. You did the interview with me on October 19th, and then it was basically radio silence from the company for 2 months, and a lot of speculation happened during those 2 months. It wasn't from you, it wasn't from the company, it was from other people, and it created this sort of hype that this whole thing was figured out already. And it's not. It's a process. It's a very detailed, complicated process. It takes time. It takes time and a lot of hard work. You've scratched the surface of it. You've had the first hit. You got Barrick on board, but there's still a lot of drilling that needs to be done to really figure this thing out fully. I'm going to press you one more on the IP, and if you don't want to say any more, that's fine. What are the differences, the notable differences between the 2022 IP and the 2023 IP?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the 2022 IP, like geometry wise, what were we seeing? We were kind of seeing this relatively straight, like it wasn't curving, but kind of gently dipping to the west chargeability anomaly. So the key difference really is that the 2023 anomaly, like the 2023 survey shows the big picture. It shows the whole thing. And basically, in a nutshell, I'll just sort of describe what I'm seeing, without giving away directions and too much information. So what we're seeing is a roughly cylindrical shaped body that goes from fairly near surface, maybe a couple hundred meters, starts around 200 meters down, which is where its porphyry typically starts. We've not drilled this area, and we're seeing this sort of vertical thing that goes all the way down to the lower limit of where we survey, with 850 meters down. This is a super, super, super interesting target to me, and it's beyond a shadow of a doubt the number one no-brainer drill target. I think what that potentially represents, and this is just an interpretation, it could be wrong, but we haven't yet found the early porphyry intrusion. So with porphyries, they're formed from these magmatic intrusions that come in with a lot of copper and water, and that's, they kip that off and they form these deposits. The first magmatic intrusion to come in, that early mineral porphyry, as we call it, that's the target. That's always the target in porphyries, because those are the ones that are juiced. That's your core of the system. We haven't found that yet. And we know we haven't found that yet because we haven't, the porphyries that we've drilled, these quartz porphyry, you'll see them in the cross sections, and there's these little dikes and things that are dipping. Those are not chocked, loaded full of veining like an early mineral porphyry will be. In fact, the ones that we've intersected have lower grade than the surrounding volcanic country rock. So that just tells you that they're late. So you'll get these early mineral ones, that's what we're targeting, and then you'll get another and another and another and another. So as these porphyry intrusions come in, every subsequent one to come in is going to have slightly lower grades and lower grades and lower grades until you get like the really late ones that are just ultra low grade. We've hit some of the sort of intermineral intrusions in some of these holes, these sort of lower grade intermineral ones. But what this anomaly, what this IP anomaly that hasn't been tested yet, off of that is this west or sort of shallow dipping, chargeability anomaly, which kind of looks like, okay, so you had your early mineral porphyry, that's going to be the target, your vertical cylinder, and then this sort of mushroom shaped cap coming off of it that sort of spreads out in all directions. That's what we drilled. We drilled sort of near the edges of the mushroom cap. And the mushroom cap is where that high grade. So if you think in hole 5, we have that 15 meters running almost 2%. That was in the mushroom cap. So now, obviously, what we're going to do is start drilling in towards that mushroom cap, towards the mushroom stalk, which just seems very obviously like the center of it all. So it's a very compelling anomaly.
I like the mushroom, metaphor. It makes a lot of sense, and I like mushrooms too. So that's a double winner. I do want to open up if somebody has a question for Chris. I think we'll take one, maybe two questions. And while people are getting ready to ask their question, I'm going to ask you another question. What can you tell us about plans for 2024? It's January, it's early days. You're still figuring some things out, but what are you thinking
Yep.
in terms of number of rigs, how many meters, budget, etc.?
Yeah, for sure. So we've got somewhere between 25 and 30 million cash in the bank with all the warrants and everything else that came in. So I want to spend as much of that as I possibly can. So what we're doing now is we're on a hiring spree. We're trying to, the real limit is bandwidth, personnel, like how many geologists and techs and core cutters, right, to handle as much possible core as we can drill. So that's, sort of our main focus now is this hiring spree. But my target, and this isn't like a definitive number that I'm giving now, I'd say minimum we're going to be doing 10,000 meters, but what I'm aiming for, what I'd like to do 20,000 meters. I think that would be a good size program. And because it's mostly going to be, deep drilling. There's not going to be any more, shallow silver only focused holes. We're going to hit silver on the way down, and we're going to focus on the porphyry. So these are going to be like 500 meter to 1,000 meter deep holes, which kind of makes things a little bit easier logistically because you're not moving the rig every day or every other day, right? You just kind of set it and forget it for a few weeks. So we're looking at probably what we're going to do is we're going to have 3 core rigs. So 2 of them are going to be the same rigs that we had last year. So same depth capability, which is about 1 kilometer roughly, or 3,300 feet. And then we're going to bring in 1 big rig. And that big rig can drill HQ, which is sort of a medium size diameter core, down to 5,000 feet. It can take NQ even deeper than that. So, I mean, I don't know, potentially, maybe even up to 2 kilometers if we wanted to go that deep. I don't even know if we want to go, but we'll have the capability if we get into this mushroom stock and it's just mind-blowing grades and they don't seem to be stopping. We'll have that big drill. So we'll have the 3 core rigs. And then to save on costs a little bit and make things more efficient, we're going to do what's called RC pre-collars. So basically that means you bring in an RC rig, which is a lot cheaper on a per foot per meter basis. It starts all the holes. So the upper plate rock is really cruddy. It's just super busted up, shattered clay, just, that's where we had all our problems. It's funny, like most of the time, the deeper you're drilling, the more your costs go up, right? Like on a per foot basis. Ours actually did the opposite because our toughest drilling was the shallow drilling. Getting through that shallow stuff was like, you're good. So then you case it off and then you get into the porphyry, and then it's relatively easy drilling once you get into the porphyry. So to keep our costs down, we'll basically RC, which doesn't get you a core, just gets you a bunch of chips and stuff. But you can assay it, right? So we'll still be able to assay the silver. But that geology, the upper plate geology, isn't terribly important to us. It doesn't give us a lot of information. And then basically once it gets down to 600 feet, 700 feet, whatever, 200 meters, where the porphyry starts, it pulls off, it leaves its casing in the hole, and then the diamond rig comes in and basically starts coring from wherever the porphyry starts to as deep as you need to go.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How important is the metallurgical test work to you guys, and have you done any metallurgical testing so far?
Not yet, but we are starting that process now. So there's a company, some people I'm just very close and familiar with based out of Denver called Forte Dynamics. And their metallurgist is a guy by the name of Deepak Malhotra. And funny enough, actually, this conversation started back when we were looking at the silver because he did Arizona Mining, which was bought by South 32, the big Hermosa Taylor, CRD, silver, lead, zinc. They had a problem with their manganese, which manganese oxide can cause challenges in the oxide zone. Like it's not a problem once you get below into the sulfide zone. It's just manganese carbonate, no issues. But they had a lot, because it's southern Arizona, so their oxidation went a lot deeper. And he actually cracked the code down there on figuring out, because the silver recoveries can be quite bad where you have a lot of manganese oxide because it'll consume your. So he's going to be the guy doing all the metallurgical work for us as well. And obviously the focus is going to be on the porphyry, but the silver is still significant. I think ultimately at the end of the day, the silver now, obviously it's no longer the focus. It's going to be the difference between, whether this thing is a open pit or an underground block cave operation.
Got it. Um, and then just another question about some of the soil sampling. So, um, the area to the southeast has some pretty nice copper and gold soils. Um, Pretty nice gold anomaly there. But the deeper stuff, the deeper holes, there's no gold. It doesn't run gold. Is this based upon your understanding of copper porphyries? Is this normal, or is there something about this porphyry that's a bit, different? I guess.
Yeah, that I don't know the answer to, and that's a big head scratcher on our side as well, right? It's like why, and even in the rock samples we took on surface, are we getting up to a gram gold and just not seeing that in the stuff we've drilled? I think it's got something to do with zonation. Um, Actually, a lot of that stuff on surface is really, really distal. So you go from your potassic center through your phyllic margins, which is what we drilled, to the propylitic, really outer propylitic stuff that we sampled and soil sampled on surface. So that's got gold. There's skarns as well on surface that we sampled that have gold. So I don't know if it's like you got to be in the skarns to get the gold. What happens when we drill into the center, the potassic center? Quite often, you'll get the gold, in closer to the center, and then the phyllic can sort of remobilize it or wash it out or whatever. Obviously that's the hope, because I'd love to get a little bit of gold credit with this thing just to boost up the equivalent overall. But yeah, that's one I just don't have the answer to at this stage.
Okay. Gorm, do you have a question for Chris? I just made you a speaker.
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so Chris, when are you planning approximately to announce the next leg of the program? I'm assuming you will kind of probably divvy it up and maybe announce 10K of drilling or something first. And when are you planning to start the program approximately as well?
So I really want to start in March, but my team tells me that that's probably too aggressive. So one thing we're doing right now is we're putting in a plan to rock the roads. So right now the access roads are like old dirt farm roads. And so when they get wet, they turn into basically a big mudslide. And so summer months it's fine because it's really dry here in the summers and we don't have to worry about rain. But shoulder season, that's obviously a huge problem. So there's a local quarry in town. Funny enough, we know the owners very well, and a local contractor who builds all our drill pads and all our roads and everything else. So he's putting together a proposal now. It's probably going to be about 100 grand to get 3-inch crush, lay it down over all these roads, and basically turn them into gravel instead of dirt. And so that will obviously be more winter appropriate. And then really it's just a function of what happens. We got an El Nino year, so it's been pretty mild, but of course now it's like minus 20 Celsius and dumping snow. So we don't know. We don't know what the future is going to bring, like February and March snow wise, but I think we're just all crossing our fingers that it's mild, the road gets rocked. We're going to put safety berms and other things up, right? Because we don't want trucks slipping off the road, but kind of a moving target. I'd say, look, worst case, if we get a real, for some reason, nasty end of the winter, we'll be in there in early May. But I'd like to get started sooner, if at all possible.
Okay, so to follow up on that, with the roads, do you expect to be able to drill a bit later this year? Maybe you'll have like 7 months or 6 months
Yeah,
drilling?
that's exactly. So, that will also help us hit our, target of 20,000 meters, plus potentially. Obviously, the longer the season, yeah, we're just trying to extend the season in both directions.
But I mean, you should, with 3 rigs, I'm taking that the advance rate is like 30 meters. So let's say 100 meters even per day, and then so that's like 3K per month. You could possibly exceed then 20K if you were going full blaze and hitting it off.
For sure, for sure. You know, always under promise, over deliver.
Yeah,
But
that's good.
theoretically, yeah, we should be able to over deliver, but we will under promise for the time being.
And also,
All right.
just one quick one, if it's okay. The forest permitting for the southeast to be able to work and drill there, is that you expect to get that? When do you expect to get that this year?
Yes, we do expect to get that this year. When this year, I don't know. We should have clarity on that fairly soon. The ball is in their court now, finally, which is great. There was a ton of back and forth. I mean, months and months and months of really getting it dialed in, but now they've given us that dialed in check mark. So we're just going to wait on them. It's a CE, which basically means there's not much disturbance, so it should be relatively straightforward. Hopefully midsummer, you know, hopefully not the end of summer. Hopefully it's more like midsummer. Regardless, I think a lot of our drill plan is going to be on, the area where we hold the surface mining rights too. Fortunately, again, fingers crossed, knock on wood, it looks, from the geophysics and from everything else we're seeing, the mineralization is going to stay on state land that we hold the surface mining rights to. And I mean, that would be the best case scenario, right? Don't even have to deal with the feds, but we will see, and we'll undoubtedly test it, by the end of the year at some stage.
All right, Gorm. Thanks for the questions. I'm guessing that Gorm is Swedish. I can recognize that that accent, as I'm part Swedish myself. Um, One more question: how much cash does Hercules have, and what do you think your budget will be for 2024?
Yeah, good question. We've got about, well, we had 30 million, just bought a house, so that took that down. But if we say, we're going to aim for 20,000 meters, and, I think we can get our all-in drilling rate down to about 500 Canadian with just these deeper holes, getting everything dialed in. We'd be looking at about a $10 million drilling budget for 20,000 meters.
All right. I think that's great. Exactly an hour, Chris. I think I know I hit on all my questions. There's no more questions in the queue that I can see. Thanks a lot for your time. I think this was a very informative conversation. I know I learned a lot, and I'm a shareholder of Big, and I look forward to a prosperous 2024.
Absolutely. I know there's a lot of people that probably felt that they missed the boat. Of course, now the pullback is here, and I've been telling, people in my circle that I was not telling people to buy at $1.50, right? Like, let's be realistic. It got very frothy, and I am now looking at people, and they're saying, now it's my perspective has shifted a lot, right? Like, you have to start adding on dips and pullbacks. I mean, this is obviously a major pullback here, and if anyone out there feels like they missed the boat on this and you don't get in now, then I don't know what else to tell you. And I know that's hard to do psychologically, right? Like, it's, we always buy on FOMO when things are moving up, and now it's really scary to do. But, if you don't get positioned before we start this year's program, you might be very sorry.
Do you think any of you or your board will be buying shares on the open market?
Absolutely, absolutely. Kelly Malcolm, I think, made a pretty good insider buy just recently because he doesn't have access to the assay data. Like, he's purposely kept out of the loop on that. I know our VPX really wanted to do some buying, but he can't, right? I think until we get all these assays out,
Mm.
we're obviously still blacked out. But yeah, don't be surprised to see some insider buying once everything's out here.
All right, thanks a lot, Chris. I'm going to go hit the gym, try to get a little buff for my trip to Vancouver. Have a great, rest of your day, and talk soon.
Okay, man. Have a good lift.
Cheers.
Bye.